Hey, thanks for joining me. In today's video, we're going to take a look at a brand new power station from Pecron. Now, if you've watched many of my videos in the past, at some point you've heard me talk about Pecron in the past. They are one of my favorite brands in terms of bang for the buck. They fall pretty much in the budget pricing category, but yet they offer a lot of feature for the cost. And this is their largest power station to date. This is their new E3600LFP, and as the LFP would imply, it is lithium iron phosphate chemistry. I think it is rated for up to 3,500 cycles to still retain at least 80% of its original rated capacity, which in this case is 3,072 watt hours. So it is a bit of a beast, and it's got some very interesting features. First of all, it does have battery expansion. You can hook up to 4 expansion batteries, and I believe each one of those is 3,072 watt hours, which would give you a combined total with the built-in 3,072 watt hours of a little bit over 15 kilowatt hours if you maxed this thing out. Now, it also has a variety of pretty useful ports on the front, something that a lot of power stations do not have, but a few now are starting to have, is this RV30 port, or TT30. And these are 30 amp AC outputs. Now, this also has over here a 30 amp XT60 output for DC power, which is really great if you have a lot of DC appliances and you want to patch this into, say, your DC power infrastructure on your RV or your van. You've got an XT60 connector that can handle up to 30 amps of output. Now, we'll get into some of these other ports here in a minute, but let's find out what you get in the box with this thing. First of all, you get a quick start guide, and there are some fluorescent stickers here that you could put on some of these ports to make them easier to see in the dark. So that's kind of interesting. It does have mobile app support, as the quick start guide does imply, and it's just got some basic instructions on kind of what the basic inputs and outputs are. So not a lot here to dig into in terms of substance, but nice to have if you're not familiar with the power station. They do give you this pretty nice cable kit here, and let's see what cables they actually give you. And as you can see, there's a variety of stuff in here. So right off the bat, this is very interesting. This is actually an AC charging cable. So if you've got shore power that you want to charge this thing off of, and it has a TT30 or RV30 connector or a receptacle on it, this has a 30 amp TT30 plug on it that you can use to charge this thing up to 30 amps worth. So that should give you around 3,200 watts of AC charge power, I believe. And then in here you also have your actual user manual, little warranty card. All right, so in the top part, we've got another AC charging cable. It uses the same port, which is on the side here, and we'll get a close-up look at those ports in a minute. But this allows you to charge at up to 1,800 watts. So if you got standard 15 amp circuit, so this is your 15 amp charging cable for normal 120 volt 15 amps. So that kind of gives you a slightly lower charging speed or capability than this one does, this larger 30 amp cable. But as you'll see when we get into the app, this does have a touchscreen interface, which is unique and new for Pecron, and I actually really like this. I played around a little bit before I started recording, and you can go in there and adjust the charge rate from 0 to 100% or anywhere in between, and very handy. So regardless of which cable you're using, you can still vary the charge rate. So this is a maximum 1,800 watts. This one is a maximum 3,200 watts. So again, really liking the flexibility that Pecron's given you with this. Also in the cable pouch, you get this charging cable. This is not for jumping a battery, but you could recharge your car battery or any other sort of battery. Maybe you've got a couple of lithium iron phosphate batteries powering your RV's DC system. This would be a way that you could actually transfer power from this unit to those batteries really easy just by using these alligator clamps. And that connects up here to this 30 amp XT60 output. Standard car charger. Again, this is going to go to the lower power input. This is a DC 5521, and that is the lower power input on the side. You can also use this with up to 30 volts of solar, maxing out at about 150 watts. And then actually while we're here, let's just go ahead and take a look. You've got two other XT60 inputs, And these are 32 volts up to 150 volts at 1200 max times 2. So 1200 watts of solar into both of those ports gives you a maximum solar input of 2400 watts, which is pretty impressive. And I'm glad to see that they've gone to the more standard XT60 input versus that aviation style connector that they used on the E3600LFP series. And I think they might have used it on the 1800, but don't quote me on that. I may or may not be correct on that. But this one does, in fact, use the XT60 inputs, which are far more common and easy to find cables for. So I like the fact that they have switched over to that. And then there's a little mini flathead screwdriver in here for some purpose. I don't know. There is also an MC4 cable to a dual-sided XT60 connector on this side. So that's interesting. And then there is another MC4 cable to a single XT60 input on this side. So yeah, a couple of MC4 solar connectors. So there's a lot of cable options that they include in this. All right, let's very quickly kind of just go over what some of these other ports are on the front of this thing. And you can see, like I mentioned, this is a touchscreen, so you can go around and adjust settings, but we're going to take a look at that in detail more in a minute. But looking at the other ports, I've already talked about these other input ports on the DC side, and I've talked about this AC output, this 30 amp TT30. You've got 4 120 volt, 20 amp 3-prong outlets. And then over here you've got your USBs. There is a single PD100 output Type-C port, so 100 watt output Type-C. And then there is an 18 watt quick charge Type-A USB. And in these other ones here, you also have an 18 watt Type-C and an 18 watt Type-A. So there's a total of 2 Type-C 18 watts, 1 PD100 watt Type-C port, and then there's a total of 3 quick charge 18 watt USB-As. So 6 USB ports in total. That's pretty nice. It's got your standard 10 amp 12 volt car accessory socket output. It's got a DC 5521 port here on the bottom, if I can open that, and that is a 12 volt 5 amp. So a little bit smaller, 60 watts I think is all you're going to get out of that one. So that might be good for a CPAP machine or something like that. You want to direct power something via DC power at relatively low output, so up to 60 watts out of that guy. And then on the side over here, on the right side, there are 2 battery expansion ports that you can use to connect those battery expansions. And then just to give you a quick look on this side, and by the way, this thing weighs upwards of 80 pounds. I have to put that in there, the exact weight up here. But you've got a couple of port covers here. It says synchronous interface. It looks like an RJ45 connector. That must be for some kind of programming. I'm actually have to do some research to find out what that's for. It does have a little terminal connector here for a grounding pin if you want to provide ground on this. And then this is, as I said, the AC input side, and it's either 1800 watts or 3200 watts depending on which cable you use. All right, I think that is about all. On top, there are 2 wireless charging pads, so you can be wirelessly charging your phones overnight, up to 2 of them, just by laying them on top of here and having your DC inputs on. And yeah, and then there's, so as I said, there's a mobile app and touchscreen control. All right, so at least based on how this thing is presenting right now, I'm very impressed with the capabilities of this. Let's find out if it lives up to the actual specs and gives you that full 3600 watts pure sine wave output, and whether or not that battery capacity is actually a reasonable usable capacity. Because as we know, if you watch some of my other videos, you never get the actual rated capacity out of these batteries, because the BMS needs some protection buffer to be able to keep you from fully draining and then being stuck where you can't actually even charge the battery. So there are limits to how much of that usable capacity you can actually get to, or that rated capacity. We're going to find out what that is, both through the AC outputs. And so let's go ahead and jump forward in time and run through the testing and see how this thing actually performs. All right, let's do a usable capacity DC discharge test. So there are multiple DC outputs here. I have 2 testers, so I'm going to try to run 2 at the same time, pulling from the 5 amp 12 volt DC 5525 port here, and also the standard car socket. So you can see we're reading 13.4 volts on this one, and if we look down there, 13.466 volts on this one. So let's find out how we can do here. Let's go ahead and dial up this guy and see if we can get 10 amps. So here's 10 amps coming off the car socket. The other one is limited to 5 amps, so I need to actually change the output on this. And we are off to the races. So I have both units have reset their counters, got both testers going, and we'll see what happens when this BMS shuts us down and we have lost power. So we're at 12.3 volts right now off of the car socket under load, and 12.6 volts under load off of the DC5525 accessory port. All right, so let's check back in when this thing is fully shut down. We'll add up the watt hours we got, find out what that usable capacity is out of the DC side. All right, it is about, call it 16 or 17 hours later, and the test is completed. The BMS has definitely shut down output from the DC ports. Let's zoom in over here. Let's see what we ended up with there. On the tester on the left, we got 852 watt hours. And on the tester on the right, we got 1,664 watt hours. So that combined gives us a 2516 or 2,516 watt hours. That's out of a rated 3,072. So that would put us right at just about 82% of rated capacity through the DC ports. That is slightly on the bottom half of average, but definitely squarely in the average of between 80 and 85%. All right, we are fully charged back up. And by the way, if you had multiple expansion batteries on this, you could actually switch views to see the multiple states of charge on your other expansion batteries. Like I said, if you had more than one installed. We're going to go back to the main view here, kind of the default view at 100%. It is very hot in the test room right now. So instead of my usual oil heater test, we are going to put an 8,000 BTU air conditioner on this thing, and that will be a welcome change in testing strategy given the heat in this room right now. All right, so we're at 100%. Let me go ahead and turn on the AC inverter. And there we go. AC inverter is showing on. Let me disconnect the power here so we don't have pass-through power. So let me go ahead and plug it into this one on the side, and we're going to log watt hours on this guy right here. Let's see, we are measuring 120 volts. That's excellent. Let's go ahead and fire up that air conditioner. That feels better already. All right, according to the timer at this level of load, which is coming up at just under 600 watts, if we were to pull that continuously, that would equate to about 5 hours and change in runtime. But depending on how this room cools down, since it's not super well insulated, the compressor may or may not stay running the entire time, so we might get more runtime out of it than that. Okay, we're going to let this run all the way down, and we're going to count up how many watt hours we're able to actually get usable out of this 3,072 rated watt hour power station from Pecron. All right, our AC discharge capacity test is done. Let's find out how many watt hours out of that rated 3,072 we can actually get through the AC inverter. Wow, that is an excellent number. So 2,870 watt hours. That's, as I said, out of a rated 3,072. That equates to 93.5% of rated capacity, which is one of the best numbers that I have seen out of an AC inverter in terms of usable capacity. So very, very good numbers on the AC inverter for this E3600LFP. All right, let's do some more testing. All right, while we have this thing fully depleted, let me just go ahead and see if it'll turn back on here. I think, yeah, the BMS will let us come back on, but we're at 0%. Let's do our unattended solar charging test to make sure that this thing will take a charge from solar panels when the sun comes up without us having to be interacting with the unit at all. So basically, this solar capacity, there are 3 MPPT charge controllers in here. One for low watt panels. This is up to 150 watts. This is a 20 DC5521, I think, and it goes between 12 and 30 volts. So you cannot put more than 30 volts worth of solar into this particular connector. These other 2 connectors are XT60, and they can handle between 32 volts and 150 volts. 150 volts is outstanding. That means we can put 1200 watts of solar on each one of these ports for a total of 2400 watts of solar. The only catch is you have to have at least 32 volts in order to generate any power out of these two ports. So I have got my little test 800 watt array outside, and I currently have it turned off, but I have got it wired in series, and they are about 20 volts each. So I'm going to get about 80 or 82 volts, probably maximum, well under that 150 volt max. So no problem with this, my 800 watt array in there. And it's not going to be clipped either because we are well under that max. So we're going to see, what we can get out of that 800 watt array. I'm just going to use this one on the left, and I'll go ahead and turn this on. We'll see if the unit detects the solar panel connection. It is 8 o'clock at night. Yeah, so it is detecting the connection, so the display has come on, but I'll be very surprised if we get any input. So we have a little solar panel icon there, 0 watts. The sun is well past the tree line, and so there's not really any direct sun at all, and only very dim ambient light. So we're in a good shape here at 0%. Let's see if this thing will wake itself up in the morning and begin charging automatically. So I'll see you in the morning and we'll see what it's doing. All right, it is about 9:15 in the morning, and it is very overcast outside. You can make out where the sun is in the sky, but yeah, you can't really see it. All right, as we can see, we are getting 79 watts input on the solar. I didn't have to do anything. This test isn't about how much solar we're getting, but does it auto resume charging in the morning? Because not all power stations will do that. This one definitely does, so it definitely passes the unattended recharge test for solar. All right, let's do a test and find out how clean the AC output is from this inverter, whether or not there's a significant amount of harmonic distortion. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to just use this old guitar amp. No grounding pin on this thing, nothing like that, no built-in noise suppression. So let's get a baseline first of what the amp sounds like when connected to a known clean power source. So I'm going to take my microphone off, and I'm going to hold the mic up to the amp so we can get a nice baseline sample of what it sounds like normally. Here we go. All right, so pretty quiet, nice, pretty prominent pop at the beginning. But then after that, just a very slight hum. So very quiet. Let me go ahead and change the power source, and let's try that test again. So now this is going to be the power from the E3600. See if there's any more noise. All right, that sounded virtually the same to me. So I think that this would be very suitable even for things like ham radios or remote PA systems where you need some remote power, or guitar amps, things like that, without introducing a lot of noise or buzz into your audio stream. So that definitely passes the noise test. All right, let's do some load testing on this monster 3600 watt continuous AC inverter. So you can see I've got some plugs in there already. We've got a timer on top. Once we get this thing up to as close to max load as we can get it, we will start the timer, see if we can go a full 10 minutes at max load. It's pretty warm in here, so I imagine we're going to hear some fans, but let me go ahead and start adding some load. All right, I've actually, believe it or not, got some space heaters running, which is exactly what I do not need. They're right outside the room, but still going to get warmer in here. All right, so we are at 2,830 watts. So let me go ahead and add some additional load. All right, this gets us to 3,400. Let's see if we can get a little closer. All right, I didn't want to do this because it's already too hot in here, but I'm going to add another small space heater. And believe it or not, I'm just now starting to hear the fans on this E3600. All right, we are right at 3,600. It's going to drop back down as my little space heater settles. Let's go ahead and start the timer and see if we can last a full 10 minutes at max draw. All right, definitely lasted the full 10 minutes. We are just literally like 35, 36 watts under that 3600 watt cap. Let me see if what happens when we try to raise this just a little bit higher. Let me see if I've got any more power that I can pull from it. It's warm in this room, let me tell you. All right, let's see what happens here. 3864, 3872. And the fans you hear ramping up are not the 3600. That is the other power station that I'm charging. All right, now we've just dropped because one of my space heaters is cut out because it's too hot. Yeah, I mean, I can't even get my other space heater to turn on right now because it is so warm in this room. It has shut itself down. So we got nearly 14 minutes of runtime at well over that 3600 continuous rated output. So man, this thing is a absolute tank. Definite pass on the inverter load test. All right, I pulled the load. The power station is still cooling itself down. Let's do another check on that volume level. So just under 60 decibels. And this is basically after running it for almost 15 minutes at max output. That is really impressive. Here, this is the brand new Pecron 300 watt solar panel, and they've gone from this sort of multi-layered, canvas coated, stitched kind of a build to a single, very thin layer. And a lot of solar panels are now going to this design. And frankly, I like this because these are a lot lighter weight. They're a lot easier to handle. This is a full third less heavy than the 330 watt panel. So this one comes in at just under 20 pounds versus just under 30 pounds. And it still is built with extremely high quality materials. It does have in here the user manual. If we take a look inside there, you can see there that we've got a voltage maximum power point of 34.5 and a VOC or open circuit voltage of 43.52. So this is a little bit higher voltage than the 330 watt, but again, still completely fine to connect this up to that E3600. And also again, very nice long MC4 cable. So you do need an adapter to go from the MC4 to the XT60, but thankfully the E3600LFP does give you that adapter cable in the box as we saw. So let me get these two panels set up in the sun and we'll take another close look at how they're built and how they're different. All right, I've got both panels set up here. Now I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this panel because they don't actually sell this 330 watt version anymore. This is the replacement, the 300 watt version. And one thing I do like about the replacement, because it is so much lighter, it is a lot easier to deploy. Now because it is lighter, it is probably a little more susceptible to being toppled over in the wind. So you might want to get creative with how you tie it down. But unlike the original one, this one does have metal grommets, which I'm a big fan of because that gives you a lot of options in terms of tying it down. It also has these plastic corner protectors. You can see it does have that pebbled sort of prismatic ETFE coating, which is very durable. It also catches sun from a variety of angles and helps increase the output efficiency. And it does use magnetic connectors instead of Velcro, which I actually like because I find the Velcro ones to be a little bit of a wrestling match. So as you can see, it actually keeps a slightly flatter profile than the original one does. The main reason I'm showing you both panels is because I want to kind of give you a sense of what two 300 watt panels will do in terms of charging. I really like the fact that if you only deal with two panels, which when you're doing portable power stations, having just a couple panels to deal with is a lot more convenient than trying to juggle multiple panels strung together in series and parallel. So this makes it pretty easy. And with the 3072 watt hours, what we need to do is take, in this case, since I have 600 watts of input, take that, multiply that by 5, and that gives us about 3000 watt hours of charge capacity that we can expect to get out of 600 watts of panels in a single day of full sun. And we are getting 338 watts total right now. All right, just for kicks, as we're waiting for the sun to align, let me go ahead and lay these flat because it is the middle of summer and the sun is going to be directly overhead. So we'll actually probably get the best alignment if we just lay these flat. So let me go ahead and do that now and see if we get something better than 375 watts that we are currently getting. And let's just see what we're getting. You can make that out. We are getting 411 watts. So we had a pretty good jump there from where we were before. So we got a good 35 or 40 more watts than we were getting with them at more of a 45-degree angle. So we're going to leave them in that position, and as you can see here, it's estimating 2 hours and 45 minutes at a current state of charge of 64% to fully top that off to 100. So we'll just kind of leave them like that and see where we end up. All right, the shadows are starting to get a little bit long. We are, if you make that out, at 99%. Should be done any time now. I'm going to go ahead and pull the plug on this. I actually did move them because the sun had shifted a pretty good amount in the sky, and I did have to put them in the garage for about an hour and a half today because a storm came in and threatened, but didn't actually drop any rain. I didn't want to take a chance, and now we've got another storm moving in sometime in the next 20 minutes, according to the radar anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and put this thing away. Definitely a success. 600 watts total of solar, 2 300-watt panels. Definitely enough to keep this thing fully charged. If you want to rely on solar for charging exclusively, you can definitely do that. And in case you were wondering if you can dual charge, you absolutely can. So I'm charging via the 15 amp AC cable. And I got 1700 watts coming in. It's actually pretty early in the morning still, and I don't have direct sun on my solar panels, but I am getting 53 watts in on solar, and I'm discharging to an air conditioner, which you can probably hear in the background, at a little over 1,000 watts. So dual charging and discharging simultaneous, definitely supported. By the way, as much as I do like this display, I think you could justifiably make the case that it's a little bit on the busy side. But apparently Pecron has thought of that as well, because you can come in here and switch it to simple mode, and boom, now you've got a very streamlined, easy to read interface. Okay, this video is getting super long, so let me real quick wrap up with some final comments about this E3600LFP. So first, I did actually test the UPS function off camera, and I can confirm that it does work exactly as advertised. And it did also pass my 24-hour DC fridge test with intermittent power consumption, which is really not a surprise since you do have complete control over the shutdown timeouts. And I did also do a no-load draw test on that AC inverter, and after a full 16.5 hours with the inverter left on, the state of charge had only dropped by a minuscule 3%, which, if I do a little bit of math on that, equates to about 7 watts of continuous power draw by that monster 3600 watt inverter. So once again, extremely impressive efficiency numbers on that AC inverter. Now this unit was still on pre-order status while I was working on this video, and I didn't have access to the EP3000 48 volt expansion battery module to be able to show you what that looks like. But I'll pull that thing up here, and I did do some research on it, and I'm extremely encouraged by what I found. So first of all, notice that just like the 15 amp and that 30 amp AC charging cables, all of these battery connections on this side over here have those 90-degree angled connectors, which is super nice because it keeps the cables from eating up a bunch of space unnecessarily. Also, these EP3000 expansion modules do have built-in solar charging capability and their own DC outputs. So you can actually use them completely independent of that main unit if you only needed DC power. And I'm really glad to see that Pecron has kind of designed this level of flexibility into this product. And on top of that, the pricing on these expansion modules is actually extremely compelling right now at just about 33 cents a watt hour. But getting back to the main unit, the only common feature that I can find that you're really not getting with this unit is a built-in area light. And I think it actually makes sense that they didn't include that, because at almost 80 pounds, you're probably not going to be schlepping this around the campsite trying to use it as a light source. So what's the bottom line on this thing? I really do think Pecron has hit it out of the park with this new E3600LFP power station. And I think if you're looking for something that works equally well as both, say, a mobile power solution and a mid-range capacity home power backup solution, or maybe even a small off-grid solution for that matter, and you'd prefer not to pay a premium price for it, I think this E3600LFP certainly deserves serious consideration. And I do hope to have the opportunity at some point here soon to test that dual unit 240 volt split phase configuration. But I'll have to wait and see on that one and see if I can get my hands on it or not. But yeah, do check out the links below and take advantage of the great pre-order pricing deals that are going on right now, including on that 300 watt solar panel option, which I think is a great option and great matchup for this particular power station. And as I understand it, even though these are pre-order, all of these things are going to start shipping pretty much any day now. And you'll also find some discount codes below that'll get you the best price out the door if you do decide to pull the trigger on one of these deals. And hey, if you do have any questions about the unit that maybe I didn't cover in the video, please feel free to let me know in the comments below, and I'll do my best to respond. Okay, I think that about wraps it up. I do hope you found at least something useful in the video, and if you did, I'd very much appreciate it if you consider clicking on that like button for me, and maybe consider subscribing as well if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you so much for spending some of your valuable time with me on this video, and I do hope you'll consider joining me for the next one. Until then, have fun out there.